Okay, welcome everybody. I see that it has hit 12 according to my clock here. Welcome everybody to Engaging Equity Endeavors. This particular presentation, we're very excited about this presentation. We are hoping and expecting that Engaging Equity Endeavors will be a series of different webinars discussing different topics within the realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion as it pertains specifically to libraries. So our first episode today is serving Black, Indigenous people of color. Is that correct, Tara? Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did.
Communities from the lobby to the boardroom.
Yeah.
With us today is Tara Michener. Tara Michener is a mental health counselor in private practice, specializing in racial trauma and relational aggression. I'm sorry.
Okay.
She is a civil mediator, an author awarded for work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a TEDx speaker. She also has been a library trustee for over 6 years and has held multiple office positions in the library and in the profession. Her work has been featured in Essence Magazine, Prevention Magazine, Metro Parent, and more. So you can see that we are very happy and lucky to have Tara with us. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tara. Thank you very much, Tara, for being here.
Thank you for having me. And welcome to everyone that's here. I do want to take a moment to extremely give a profound note of gratitude to the Library of Michigan for allowing me to use my voice here today. I think when we talk about Black people, sometimes there's a voice stifling that happens. That's unfortunately a part of systemic racism. So when we allow Black people to use their voices, and I shouldn't even say allow, but when we open our ears to hear their voices and even give platforms for people to hear their voices, then I think that that's a very anti-racist act. And we'll talk about that as we go. So a few things that I want to say that I think are really important for purposes of this particular presentation today. It is a heavy topic, let's face it. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a hot button topic. For me, it's felt hot button all my life, but for you all, maybe yes, maybe no. Some of you may be very new to the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Maybe it was called something different when you first had a presentation. Maybe it was called sensitivity training or something else, who knows? Here's the thing. These conversations are meant to educate, to empower, and to make us better as a humanity, right? As a group of people working together. What I talk to you about today will be heavy, but it's not heavy to make you feel bad, to make you feel terrible. However, I might talk about some bad and terrible things, okay? The purpose is to motivate us to serve our communities in the best way. Libraries are supposed to be free and equitable spaces for all. That's where they came from. You all know this, right? Some people don't feel that way. And we'll talk about how we can all do better in making it a better place where our patrons that come into our doors feel like they're thought about, they're considered, and you understand their needs. So that'll be a big part of today. So even if you have paper and pens to make notes with, I always have like note cards around me. I encourage you to take notes because I think that there's some things that we talk about that you might want to digest later. You know, I'm a therapist, so I want you to take some time to reflect afterwards. You know, you might not have all of the answers of how you feel afterwards right at the ready. So it's important to take notes, to give yourself some space, even to, if you have your teams here with you, to allow them space to even reflect for themselves. And if they choose to reflect with you, they can do that as well. So keep that in mind, okay? All right, so as Claire has stated, yes, I am not representing anyone but myself today. I am a trustee at a library system, and I also have done some work this year for other libraries as far as being a speaker. I'm an author, so I go to a lot of libraries for a lot of different things, but today I'm not representing them. I'm giving you knowledge These thoughts and opinions are my own, okay? It's kind of like if you imagine, if you're on Twitter, you know what I'm talking about. It's like that little clause there. That disclaimer is important, okay? Because you're hearing directly from a person who not only lives in this skin with, from the Black experience, but also someone who studies out these things from many perspectives. So BIPOC, as Claire mentioned, Black, Indigenous people of color, Black people have been called many names amongst the years. Keeps changing and rebranding. Libraries rebrand, libraries reinvent themselves, right? Books are not as popular as they once were. I still love my books, don't worry. But many of you know what I'm talking about. You had to get on board with technology. You had to put the microfiche aside and figure out, how do I make sure that I'm staying relevant? And I think that we continue to figure out that way when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, back in the day before I was born, Black people were called Negro. Don't do that. Okay. Afterwards, Black people were called colored. Don't do that either. There are names that some people subscribe to, like Afro-American or African-American. A lot of people go by those terms. I call myself a Black person. But Black, Indigenous people of color was created around 2013. And the goal in doing that for people that are Black specifically is that it's people first language. The thought process is that if you connect to the actual people who are sometimes more marginalized, and you put that people first language, then you connect the humanity. As you're thinking about everything I taught to you today, anything I say will not make a difference if you don't connect the humanity to the experience. I can't stress that enough, because there's a lot of things we can do to check boxes, but that's not why I'm here today. I don't want you just to check a box, although we're all in Zoom squares, right? We're all in boxes, but I don't want you to check it. What I do want you to do is try to hear from a perspective of Black people and think about how it relates to your library. So that note taking that I mentioned to you, try your best to assess what you're doing in your system. I don't care if you're a shelver. I don't care if you're a trustee, a director. Doesn't matter. What matters is that you take some time out to assess what you're doing. And I think that sometimes when we look at our own selves and we can kind of think about what we need to grow in, that's better, isn't it? No one's judging you today. But I think the best critical aspect of life is when we can look at ourselves and see how we can grow. Again, reinvention, like libraries have had to do, like Black people have had to do, individuals can do that as well. So keep that in mind, okay? We're gonna talk about some heavy stuff, so I want you to get ready for it. Okay, so let's talk about me. Who is talking to you? Claire told you a little bit. I'll tell you some more. So I am a mental health professional. I am a counselor. I have a private practice in Novi, Michigan. That's actually where I live as well. Relational aggression is one of the reasons why somebody might come to me. That is one of my specialties. You might be asking yourself, what is relational aggression? It's a mouthful, isn't it? Rachel Simmons is a great, if you want to just make a note, Rachel Simmons is a great author that focuses on relational aggression. I know you're book people, so you might want to write that down. She wrote Odd Girl Out. She also wrote Enough As She Is. She has done a lot of work with the Girls Institute. But people come to me for relational aggression, which is the act of being bullied in a subtle and indirect way. It includes the term gaslighting. If you're familiar with the term gaslighting, that's awesome. If you're not, I'll tell you a little bit about what it is. So the term gaslighting was derived because there was a production from the 30s that later became a movie in the 40s. And it was about a man who decided to make his wife go insane. And he did that in a very indirect way. He misplaced her things. He did not confirm things that were true for her. He also messed with the gaslight and dimmed it all the time and played around with it. It didn't go well for her. There are people that come to my practice who feel gaslit, who feel excluded, who feel like no one's calling them a name per se, but they're treating them in a manner that definitely factors into a relationally aggressive type of bullying. So it's very social, okay? And we're social people. We're social people. So if you hurt somebody socially, that might hurt more than the punch in the face. Speaking of the punch in the face, let's talk about the other type of bullying. We know that, right? That's what you think about when you're younger. You might be on the school grounds. So there are kids that come to me for bullying, but also grown-ups deal with this too. You know, you might be called a name. You might be treated in a way that's insensitive. There's always a power imbalance when it comes to bullying. Always. You might think, well, Tara, I don't know if that's true for me. Then it might not be bullying. It might just be a mean person. Those exist. But if it's bullying, it includes a power imbalance. Now, this is tricky. It's so tricky. I'm gonna give you a scenario because I really need you to get this. I could be a CEO of a company, and that means that I might have the most power out of that whole company, per se. I might go to lunch often with my assistant, who could be a white man. But every time I go to lunch, I could be treated worse than him by the same server or maitre d', because there's an assumption of power there. You know, a white male might be considered more powerful than this Black woman. Even though I might be the CEO, I might be dressed like this, he might be in torn jeans. Doesn't matter. In this society, and when we consider systemic racism, because racism is a system, he might be treated better, right? So that's something to really keep in mind when you're thinking about power imbalances. Because sometimes we can deny people's experiences if we're like, well, that's your boss. You couldn't possibly bully them. You could. You see what I'm saying? So that's important to understand and to recognize. Another good scenario is an executive assistant at a job that might be executive assistant to the CEO and somebody else who's an executive at the company. That assistant to the CEO might have more power than that new white collar individual, because they have the CEO's ear. So there's a lot of things to consider there when it comes to power imbalances. And there's a lot of misconceptions and misperceptions when it comes to understanding that piece. Consistency is key as well. It's not bullying if it didn't happen more than once. So if I'm mean to you once, that's not good. That might make me a mean person. But if I continue to do things to you twice, I build up a pattern, a cycle, a history, and that's where it's bullying. So people come to me for that. They come to get healed. They come to talk about their instances. They come to get counseling. Racialized trauma includes both of those things. It can. It can include that relational aggression, someone denying that your racism is real. What? That doesn't happen to you. I'm sure that you misunderstood. That is relational aggression when it ties into racialized trauma. Bullying. That power imbalance example that I gave with the restaurant is a great example. But what else? Intergenerational trauma. Yes, if you've never heard of that term, let me tell you, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. And even as I say it, I feel my body react. You know, you're talking to a therapist right now, so, you know, you're going to hear some therapeutic things. So I'm going to ask you, if you're feeling your body react, can you make notes of what you're feeling right now, just for yourself? If you're feeling yourself tense, if you're feeling your breathing get labored, if you're feeling yourself get on guard or defensive or offended or any of those things, write those things down for yourself, because your body's telling you something. I know when I talk about intergenerational trauma, I feel something. I'm connected to that. Why? Because that's the inheritance that I got passed down from my ancestors. We're going to talk about the history when it comes to Black people, but a little teaser for you. Obviously, they were enslaved in America, and a lot of bad things happened. Outside of slavery, there was also Jim Crow and all these other things that have happened and continue to happen. And that trauma gets passed down. I cannot be absent of that. I carry it with me. So a lot of people come to my office because they need to talk about it. They need to discuss it. They need to work through it because they're expected to function in a way that keeps their job, right? That keeps them happy, that keeps them having a quality of life. They're expected to, take care of whatever responsibilities they have as they're enduring that trauma. So I, in my practice, provide a space for people that need to talk about that. And I provide opportunities for them to get treatment and to grow and learn, and also to get what they need. The last bullet point you see there under my specialties is anxiety. Many of you know what that is. It's very common. It's becoming more common since we're in a pandemic, let me tell you. Anxiety. So the way that can present is also one that's varied and tricky. Why? Because there might be somebody who has anxiety who just freezes. My screen didn't freeze. That was me showing you someone that just froze and couldn't move. Somebody also could have anxiety who starts having palpitations, where their heart feels like it's going to beat out of their chest. There could be somebody with anxiety that has neither of those things. Maybe their thoughts just race so fast, but nobody sees it. So you might assume that that person's okay. And there's so many other interpretations and descriptions I can give you when it comes to anxiety. Okay. So those are people that would come to me for mental health work. I'm also a civil mediator by trade as well. So I do some work with the Wayne County Dispute Resolution Center and trying to make people see eye to eye. It's tricky. It's not counseling, it's mediation work. So, we're basically helping businesses that aren't getting along with people that do business with them to try to see how they can get to a win-win, a compromise. Somebody might contact a civil mediator about an estate issue or probate issue where people don't see eye to eye in those situations, which happens often. You might know of some situations like that. There's a ton of reasons why you might see a civil mediator. But basically somebody might say, I don't want this in the courts. I want to caucus alone and see if we can come to a resolution, okay? So that's part of the work that I do as well. I'm really big into bridge building. I think it's really important. I am an author. My books range from early reader to young adult, and I have 6 of them. And I'll just show them really fast. So here we go. That was the first one. I call that my baby. That's who I am, not what I am. 100% Real is the second one. The third one is Summer Camp Survival. The fourth one is No Longer Besties, so we get a little thicker in there. Chapter books, Teen Life Crisis is the 5th one. And then my pandemic book, if you will, is I'm Just Okay. And that one was created during the pandemic, and it's helped a lot of children deal with isolation and feelings identification. So those are the books that I do, and that's where I also have a tie into a lot of library systems. I am a DEI consultant, so I have done some work corporately creating diversity councils. One thing that I created was a culture club where we said the rule of culture club was that all questions are okay. That was tricky. So there was no dumb questions. You know how you're like, oh, I'm afraid this is a dumb question. There was none of those. So Culture Club allowed everybody to be able to ask what they needed to ask, and that was okay. We had different speakers come in. We tried to enlighten. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is one of those things that is really tricky because sometimes you'll hear people say diversity training. You might hear some people say inclusion training, but if that equity isn't there, then you're missing a big portion. Why? Diversity relates to the number of people. So you could have 10 people total. You could have 5 people who are Black, let's just say for kicks, and 5 people who are white. And you might think, I have diversity. That might be true. You might have inclusiveness or you might not. It depends. Maybe there is an event for managers. Maybe all the managers are white. So it no longer looks so inclusive, does it? Right? How about equitable? Maybe you've got 10 people starting out at a library system, okay? And you're like, okay, we all work here. Look at how equal we are. Well, what if these people all get to rise to full-time? They get to rise to supervisor levels, manager levels, and these people stay at part-time, although they want to grow and have succession, they don't get that, right? So that is an equity issue. Equity is very important. You might not all seem to start from the same place, but it's a very important thing to consider people's experiences. And I think you'll get equity even more as we continue talking about considering the history. There can be an enemy of equity when people say, well, that's not fair. You shouldn't do that just for Black people because What about white people? Well, we are in a systemically racial historical pattern here, right? So that being said, sometimes if you deny a Black person something because you say, well, you have to offer it to white people, then you might not be making that Black person whole based on their history. And again, I'll get into that shortly, even more so. I am a two-time winner of a Corp Diversity Champion Award, which I'm very encouraged by. They give that to leaders in the corporate field. So they've done that for my books. They've done that for my mental health diversity work. This is what it looks like. It looks like a Grammy. It is on my desk, although I never have it displayed behind me. I am a TEDx speaker. So I have 2 TED Talks floating around online that deal with bullying. And as Claire had mentioned, I have been featured in Essence, Prevention, Free, WDET, etc. I have been a trustee for over 6 years. Before that, I basically just love libraries. I think they are amazing spaces. They always have been, and you'll hear my thoughts on that as we go. But being a trustee, you get a good breadth of the whole system of libraries. And also there's a lot of education that we can continue to grab, kind of like today, where we grow from beyond just our own doors that we might preside in, and also understand the industry as a whole. And that's been a lot of fun and really great, because library work is not necessarily my first profession, but being a person that's been able to be involved in several libraries, I've learned more and more. And of course, Library of Michigan has great opportunities for education too, so keep that in mind. Consider the history, consider the present. What about the future? That's why I'm here. That kid right there. He's my son. He is Cannon. He is 7. I am hoping that his world looks better than mine. I am hoping that I don't pass a whole bunch of intergenerational trauma down to him. That is my goal. That's why I do what I do, because I'll tell you what, he motivates me. But not just him. Your kid motivates me too. And it doesn't matter what race or ethnicity your kid is. Your kid motivates me because your kids will be the future librarians, the future directors. They will be the holders of information for us to learn from and glean from, right? Your kids will be the ones who manage the study desk or who write the articles that we read to understand more about. Your kids are the future. And I am really hoping that as we survey the history and the present, that our future can have a greater outlook, okay? Oh, y'all ready? We're gonna talk about the history. It's heavy. What are you feeling? What are you feeling? Survey yourself. Are you feeling nervous? Are you feeling tense? Well, I'll tell you what, this isn't easy to talk about, but it's gotta be talked about. History is here for a reason. You know, a lot of libraries have historical commissions within them. Some of them have them as separate branches in their cities. We have museums that we go to. History is important. Why? So we can learn from it. So let's talk about the history of Black people. Black people were stolen, and they were brought to America to be servants. They were brought here to be slaves. They were not brought here to be educated. They were not brought here to be an upstanding member of society, right? So therefore, knowledge wasn't something that anyone ever had in their minds when it came to Black people being here. They were like my chair, you know, a tool to be used to serve. My chair serves me so I can sit and present to you. So a person that's enslaved was brought here to serve somebody who called themselves their master. I don't teach my chair anything. People did not teach those who they called slave anything except for what served them. That being said, reading, which many of us take for granted these days, and if you're here, you obviously have some kind of tie to reading and literacy, that was not allowed as an opportunity for somebody who had been enslaved, right? And you might think, oh, that's too bad. But I want to get deeper with it. If knowledge is power and you can't read, there's so much withheld from you. Because although people claimed the Black people didn't have humanity, they still did. Their words didn't make it so, right? So there was a learning opportunity if people snuck and did it. And there was a yearning for people to do that. But what happened if they did? Well, there was great punishments. And I don't mean great as in awesome either. I mean great as in big. If you were a Black person and you were caught reading or trying to read or had a book in your hand or some kind of a text in your hand, then you could get 39 lashes, or you can get hung or lynched or mobbed or burnt or brutalized in some way. And usually when that happened, it was very public. Why? To make an example of you that this is not for you. Take that in, it's heavy. But if you need to step away and get some water, I get it. Black people were made examples when they tried to get educated. This is not for you. Education is not for you. And if you're a white person and you decided, you know what, I want to be an abolitionist in the way that I consider the humanity of Black people. So I'm going to teach this Black person how to read. Well, there were laws against that. So if you were a white person who decided to go out of your way to teach a Black person how to read, how to engage in literacy, how to write, how to understand these concepts, then you also were in a very dangerous position. You could be made an example of. You could lose everything. You could get 39 lashes. You could be killed because the power struggle was that great. What did we talk about? Imbalance of power, right? So slave masters definitely had a great understanding that social control was the most important. Social control of their slaves. You know, it couldn't just be that you serve me. It has to be that you serve me and you're not smart and you're not educated and you're not wise. Even the very Bible that was typically read to slaves or interpreted to slaves, they couldn't hold themselves. They couldn't read it. They couldn't understand it. That could get them killed. Think about that for a second. Installing a faith into people, but saying you can't read it for yourself. I mean, that's the biggest thing I always tell my child, like, if you want to learn something, look it up. He can read really well. I made sure of it because that's a pathway to freedom. That's not a new concept though. It was known back then that if you take away an opportunity for freedom, then you have a slave all of your life, right? So I want you to take a step with me. If you've ever been in the Charles H. Wright Museum for African American History in Detroit, you know what I'm about to talk about. But if you haven't, please make a note on your little note card to take a trip there. Take it with your group if you can. I know we're in a pandemic, we gotta be careful. But if you can get there, their main exhibit is amazing in a sense that it gives you a replica of the slave ship. People were packed in like sardines, humans, people who had humanity, people who had lives before they came to America, packed in like sardines. Some people were thrown overboard. So everybody didn't make it here. And if you made it here, you went through quite a journey to get here, to be made property, to be made a servant, to be brutalized, and to be traumatized. And when I talk about that intergenerational trauma, I shuddered because that gets passed down. And you might be thinking to yourself, oh, Tara, it is 2021. How is that connected now? It's connected. Look up intergenerational trauma and you'll understand. I'll tell you what, I love telling stories. I'm an author. I told you that already. So let's do a little story time. Okay. So once upon a time, my grandmother was born in 1922. Love her. Carrie Lawrence is her name. Was her name. It's still her name, although she's passed. But Carrie Lawrence was an incredible role model for me. Incredible. She was born in 1922. And her mom died in childbirth. She was the only girl in her family. She had about 6 other brothers. And the one time a girl was born, her mom died. Her dad died when she was 5 years old. She lived in Memphis, Tennessee. They eventually moved to Michigan through the Great Migration. You know about that, right? So they migrated to Michigan for a better life. Well, Carrie Lawrence got a better life. You know, the little girl who was born in 1922 and not allowed to do a lot of things ended up having a master's degree. First person in our family to have a master's degree. A big deal when you think about the fact that she was born in 1922. In 1921, there was this big ALA conference actually in Detroit, mind you. And it was a work roundtable for Negroes. That's what they called them at the time. And it was dealing with the disparities in libraries and Black people. Because I told you that Black people weren't able to read, but you're probably thinking, well, when they got free, they were able to. Kind of. There were Black codes before there was Jim Crow, and then there was Jim Crow. And if you're familiar with separate but equal, libraries were no exception. So our library systems were not always open to Black people. Some libraries had days where Black people could go and read. Some libraries had days where it was just a table out and there was a few texts on the table that Black people could pick from. Sometimes they weren't allowed anywhere near the library, and maybe the neighborhood would have like a bookmobile that came through with a few books for people. It's a vast history. It's a vast history, but there was still a lot of exclusion when it came to libraries. A lot of exclusion. And if there was an opportunity for libraries to be integrated, sometimes there was still a lot of disparity. So free and open spaces to all did not always hold true, even when Black people were considered to be free people, even when they were considered not to be slaves anymore. And speaking of which, you know, as we consider this history, we have to take into account, some people don't know this, that the Emancipation Proclamation said that Black people were free, but there were some people that didn't find this out until 2 years later, after the Emancipation Proclamation happened. So that's why we celebrate Juneteenth. And here's a little book for you to like take a note of. This is Juneteenth for Maisie by Floyd Cooper. It's a good one for your library system and a good one to understand. Because if you're in Galveston, Texas, and you're enslaved, when the Emancipation Proclamation happened, you were still enslaved. When the Emancipation Proclamation happened, you were still in the fields or serving other people. And unfortunately, 2 years is a lot of time, right? 365 days is a year. So times that by 2. In 2 years, what can happen? People can die. People can get separated. Imagine how traumatic that is. Again, we're talking about the intergenerational trauma that's passed down. My grandmother, I'm going back to her, was born in 1922. So she wasn't that distant from that experience, yes? Keep that in mind. This connects to me. So when people say, hey, this is the past, forget about it. There's so many connections to that. We carry that with us, okay? It's very important to understand. Let's talk about now. We're in 2021. We're in the present. You know what? I'm going to go back a little bit because I want to talk a little bit more about the past. I'm rewinding. I want to talk about my grandmother Carrie for one more second because I think this is important, and I realize that you need to know this because you're library people. My grandmother used to take me on library tours. So yes, I had a public library in the city that I lived in, but she didn't just make me stay there. Libraries are free and open to the people. So she took me all around to lots of different libraries. And I got to see a lot of different experiences, and they weren't all created equal, right? But I got to see so many different spaces and so much different energy when I went to those libraries. My grandmother thought it was really important for me to be able to see those different experiences. Probably because she wasn't able to get those experiences herself as a child, right? Because for her, libraries were segregated. And you might be thinking, well, Tara, not in the North. Yes, in the North, there were some issues there. Yeah. It happened in many places. So I wanted to share that with you. I wanted to just kind of go back historically and talk about that because it's important. It's very important. So there's a pandemic happening right now. And that pandemic has affected many of us. For Black people in particular, if you've read the stats, it's impacted us in some cases the most. You'll see lots of, in the very beginning, you'll see lots of articles about it, from anywhere from education to technology to access to sickness to fear and trust issues with immunizations and vaccinations, just the gamut, right? There's a lot there. Well, how is your library handling that? You know, when you consider how to serve your Black community in a pandemic, I know we've all had to be very creative in making sure that things are as accessible as they should be. But if there's any kind of economic issues, those are going to tie into if people can get on technology. Are you still allowing people to check out some of the hot spots and things that maybe they were able to check out before the pandemic? Those are things to consider. We're also very isolated too, right? We're in spaces together. A lot has happened. If you look backwards, this is the present, but we're going to look backwards just a year ago. My birthday is May 28th. And around that time, a couple days before my birthday, George Floyd lost his life, the time that I celebrate my life. It was said that he had a counterfeit $20 bill. That was never proven. From what I'm aware of, that's not punishable by death. But Derek Chauvin decided that it was, and he decided to make a public spectacle. Remember I said consider the history. What did they do when Black people tried to read? Public spectacle. Let's lynch you in public in the square so everybody sees that they are not welcome here and everyone needs to see this. So he didn't care the cameras were on him. He put a knee to George Floyd's neck for over 9 minutes. Now, if you can imagine how long 9 minutes is when you have a coughing fit, because I get those every now and then. I've got my allergy girl. This is not my time of year. Hence the glasses. But if you consider having a coughing fit for 9 minutes, you know how terrible that is if you have allergies. If you have any kind of condition and it's flared for over 9 minutes, you know that that's torture. But losing your life and your breath for over 9 minutes is incredibly hard. I talked about the fact that people come to me in my practice for anxiety, and sometimes that involves breathing issues. So something I do with them, and you could do this with me if you like, I say, inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth. Inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth. One last time, inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth. That centers us, that regulates us, that brings us into balance. The major tool is our breath. And sometimes we don't have a whole lot, but we have our breath. George Floyd did not have his breath. A lot of people don't feel like they can breathe when they're accosted or brutalized or hurt. Breath is a value, but it's not a given for some of your Black patrons and some of your Black staff, if you have Black staff. So it's just something to connect to and think about. It's a heavy, heavy thing to consider. Everybody can't breathe. Everybody's not allowed to breathe. For Black people, sometimes breathing can be a privilege that they're denied. And that's pretty intense when you think about the fact that it can regulate you. It can bring you into balance. If you're having any of those anxiety issues that I talked about earlier, it can actually help to heal those. Grounding is something I do with my clients where they use their breath and they take in the senses. If you can't use your breath, you're in this horrible traumatic state. That's torture, absolute torture. If you have asthma or anything like that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't have asthma, but I did have a reaction to some really strong air freshener once, and I had an asthmatic-ish situation happen. It wasn't fun, and I was really grateful I didn't have asthma. Breath is a value. It's important. When people come into your library, do they feel like you valued their breath? When Black people come to your library, do they feel like you cared that George Floyd's neck was kneeled on for over 9 minutes? It's important that you do. It's important that you do. Connecting that humanity. You know, a lot of people were killed by police brutality that were Black over the years, you know, from the time of slavery to current. Why was George Floyd's death something that made people say, let's change up our policies. Let's fire Aunt Jemima, she's a trope. Let's do something different. Let's have some marches in places where there's never been marches at before. Because breath connects us to humanity. George Floyd called out for his mom. He called out for family. That intergenerational tie, he called out for her. That connected us to his humanity. I think that many of us, when we saw that video or even pictures, I think many of us saw Black people are human, because all of a sudden I saw things I'd never saw in my life before. And I was encouraged and inspired, and I still am, although a lot of people have lost that spark. I encourage you, if you're one of those people that got inspired in May or June, to try to bring that spark back, because we're still human and we're still in need, even if it's not trendy, right? Juneteenth becoming a holiday is a big deal because history, as we all know, is important. You're librarians, you're library people. So you understand that history is a connecting point, but it also informs us, it educates us. There's something about it that really helps to empower us. So when you see people that maybe didn't find out that they were free and they had to go through a lot more brutalization for another couple of years, to truly see them is to recognize, I see your pain and I want to recognize it. Well, I mean, and if you don't think it's important, then you can't think the 4th of July is important, because they're both about freedom. But whose freedom do we celebrate and care about? We're both American, yeah? So this is an American thing. Juneteenth is an American holiday. So keep that in mind, okay? So how do you recognize that in your systems? And do you recognize it in your systems? And if you don't, is that something that could be a goal for yourself? As you're listening to me talk today, I hope that you're coming up with goals. I hope you're coming up with ideas that are creative beyond measure, because this doesn't have to be a bad thing. This can all be opportunity-based, right? And not an opportunity-based where we're like, check the box, look what I did. Nuh-uh, we're gonna talk about that soon. But more so a way to connect humanity, right? To see, some people feel invisible. Some people feel terrified, you know. Some people feel like dismantling is kind of their way of life. Like they're not important, okay? And those are your patrons. So I like to ask people to think about their own personal mission statement. I could tell you what to do, and that'd be awesome. It wouldn't be awesome. It would not be awesome. You don't want me to tell you what to do. You need to connect it to your own heart to do it. That's where true change happens. But my undergrad degrees, one of them is in journalism and one of them is in public relations. Now, why is that really important for you to understand today? Because in that program, my professor said, who ran our school paper, he said, if you interview someone and you're telling their story and you get their last name wrong or their first name wrong or any other name wrong, then you get an F in the class. Not the project, not the article, the class. Harsh, I thought. Little undergrad me thought, not fair. But consider what he was saying. These people are giving you an opportunity to be a part of their story. Think about that once upon a time sign I just held up, right? They're giving you an opportunity to interview them, to inquire of them, to print their experience. The least you could do is get their name right. It's so important, right? I'm Tara Michener. It got very hard when I got that last name, I'll tell you what. I used to be a different Tara. My last name was different and it was easier. But it's not always easy to get names right. But we try and we make that impact, because my story is important and my identity is a part of who I am. It's the fabric. So in your personal mission statement, when you consider who, you might be thinking about, how do I make sure that I get names right when I think about the who in the Black community that comes into my system, right? With a name like Tara, there's more Taras, right? So sometimes she's more recognized than I am. But if I correct you, or if you find out, please get it right, okay? I think the who also applies to if there's another Black person in the library system that's Black, might have a similar skin tone or something, or hair kind of similar. Make sure you know your Black people from each other. It is unfortunately very common in the Black experience to be called somebody who's not you, and it's very uncomfortable. So understanding who's who. it's a part of humanity. It's a part of making that person a person. It's saying, you're not invisible, I see you, right? And if you think, oh my goodness, Tara, why are you making a big deal out of everything? Well, I have a story for you. There's this little girl who used to sell me Girl Scout cookies. I love Girl Scout cookies. Don't get me started on them. And I was pretty faithful to her, buying her cookies every year. I wanted to help out the kids. So I bought 10 boxes and maybe ate them all in a week because I'm a compassionate person. And if I have to add pounds to myself to help, I want to do that. Her name was Michaela. Michaela came to me one day. She's like, hey, Tara, here's your cookies. And I said, it's Tara, actually, Michaela. And she said, Tara, what's the difference? I said, well, I don't know, Michaela, what's the difference? She had the biggest gas on her face. She was not about the Michaela life. She never said my name wrong again. It was cute. It was fun. But it is important to know the who's. The what. What do the people in your system need? Your library system, the Black people who are already dealing with systemic racism. What are they asking for? What books are they asking for? What are they saying when they talk to you and engage with you? What do they see when they walk into your doors? And why? Why would you want to serve them? Why are they important to you? Why are they asking what they're asking? Why are they offended sometimes? Why do you think they're offended at times? When can you make sure that you meet the needs that they have? Do they wait forever to get a letter answered? Do they get letters answered at all? When they ask for a book to be ordered, where are they at on the wait list? These are things to consider. And how will you continue to empower this community that's had a history of brutalization and trauma in our country? Don't separate our country from your city, your municipality, your area. It is not separate because we are in America and we are Americans. So I can't separate Novi, Michigan from another place, that deals with racial issues because I'm a part of that, right? We're all connected. We're America, right? So please don't shirk that responsibility to somebody else and say it doesn't happen here because it does. And if you talk to a Black person, they'll tell you. And when they do, listening is important. So the how means how you engage them when they tell you their stories. Please understand, whenever a Black person shares a story with you, that's not easy. And if it's a story that involves traumatics or anything that's really heavy, please listen to them. Don't allow their stories to be in vain. Do you see? Also, when you invite people into your library, consider all the who, what, why, when, and hows. You can use this little rubric for many ways. It can be a nice little plotting out plan for you. You see the little brainstorming circles that we use when we write. You can do a lot of things with it. And I don't want to tell you exactly what to do, but having your own personal mission statement is important. And as you do that, you want to consider the 4 W's and the 1 H. Let's talk about your system. So if I walked into your lobby, what do I see? Don't know, but I think it's really important when someone walks into your lobby that's Black that they get greeted. Because when you walk into a space, you should be greeted. I had to do that before, where people walked in and they got greeted. And I got to tell you, when people hear a hello when they walk in, they feel like they have hospitality afforded to them. They feel special. They feel important. There are Black people who have spoken about walking into systems where people give them a frown or a face that looks like, do you belong here? Those library tours I told you about that I went with my grandmother to? There were people that were like, do you belong here? Where are you from? Are they immediately shushed, even when they're just laughing? Are there differences and disparities amongst the way that you treat Black teens in your lobby versus white teens in your lobby? And these aren't judgments. These are things for you to assess and ask, because I can't tell you what you do. Does your lobby have displays that celebrate the Black community? I'll tell you what. I have had several children approach me and say, your picture's up there. And these pictures are, these kids are not all Black. Some of them, the ethnicities range, but they'll see me and they say, that's you, that's your picture, because my picture might be in the lobby. And they recognize that. And I might not even think about it, but they do. And they get happy. I had one little Black girl tell me, I want my picture in the library one day. I want to do what you do. And I thought representation matters. Who knows if she knows it? This is a volunteer position that I don't get paid for. It's a lot of work. But all she saw was that a Black woman had her picture on the wall. You know, and in many systems that can't even be true, right? So it's something to think about. How about collections? What do your collections look, you know, when you consider the lobby, you consider what kind of books are displayed in the lobby. You know, are you seeing pictures like, you know, Juneteenth for Maisie? Are you seeing those displayed? You know, what about book clubs? You know, what book clubs are you promoting? What authors' collections are you promoting? And who are you inviting in to really showcase those collections? Staffing. This is a tricky one. I talked a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and gave the example of how you could have a staff that's half and half. You know, you might have an equal balance of people that work for you, but what does that organizational chart look like? Please make a note right now to give every trustee your organizational chart, because they need to know. It's very important that they know how you staff, because that's how we can govern and have oversight when it comes to that. But if all of your Black staff are part-time and don't have access to benefits, that's not equity. If all of your Black staff don't have access to vacation time or access to special meetings or to leadership opportunities, that's an issue there, right? We're talking about libraries. Do you have Black librarians? You know, the best way to have the best Black collections, have at least one Black librarian, right? Because that little girl that came to me that saw my picture on the wall is not going to hear a book from me in the library system necessarily, unless I'm doing an author visit. But I don't work for a library. That's not where my money comes from, right? I remember when I was in elementary school, I had Miss Franklin and I had Miss Walsh in my local library, and I loved them. They're amazing. And I talked to them all the time. Miss Franklin was Black, Miss Walsh was white. They worked together in an amazing way. My little self, just like 6 or 7 years old, got to see the way that they interacted with each other. They were friendly. They were friends. So I thought, I mean, I hope they were friends, because they definitely gave off that impression. That library represented me because it had pictures of Black people, had pictures of white people, had pictures of people from all different ethnicities, and the stories ranged too. I felt like when those displays, collections, outreach opportunities were put together, that I was a thought. I was not invisible in that library. When you go into a story time, even if a book is read often that's from a Black author, which is a good thing, if there's never a Black librarian that also has a role in that, then there's a big piece missing. Because I carry with me a history and an opportunity for libraries that maybe somebody who cares about my experience just can't have. And you might have a patron who really needs to see a book chosen from a Black librarian. It's an equity issue too, right? Because it's a library, right? So you want that fairness and that inclusiveness there. So it's something to take note of if you don't have that. It's a goal to reach for. It makes a huge difference if you're calling yourself an inclusive library. Think about that. Outreach and programs are great, but I find that sometimes programming, even book clubs, can be a measure that feels soft if what's included in those book clubs and programs aren't carried out in action. For example, I went to a program where a gentleman, a Black man, was on the panel, and he was strong about like, hey, if you're not doing this in your library, then that's not good. And he really inspired me. You know, he really inspired me. He was very clear that this work is not for the light of heart. And he said a lot of things that I thought really challenged. But if you hear those types of things and we just status quo it, then we're not learning from the people that we bring in. And that's, again, where you're bringing Black people in to dredge up trauma, to dredge up their experiences, and it falls flat. Outreach, community listening sessions. What does that look like? What does a good community listening session look like? It means that you invite your community. If it's for diversity, equity, and inclusion, make that the focus. You don't have to pepper it with all these other things to tell them what to say or center yourself. Oh no, they didn't really care about what I said. You are not the center. If it's for your community, for your diversity, equity, inclusion based community, then you really want to hear more so from that experience. Keep that in mind. Watch yourself for centering. It happens often. And I'm not talking about the centering that we had when we did the breathing exercises. I'm talking about if you center yourself when it comes to Black issues. Because sometimes a Black person might say, I'm having this issue in regards to outreach or a program. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, why aren't you grateful? Which makes them feel like the library is not theirs, but like they're the visitor. If it's their library too, then it should be a free and equitable space for all, right? So watch how you react. And again, that's for yourself. When you invite Black people in to speak, when you invite Black people in to present, to read, pay them. Slavery is over. And it is a part of intergenerational trauma. Pay them. Pay them. You have a budget. So try to make sure that as you invite people in to share their experiences, their trauma, all the things that they've been through, that you consider their pockets and the energy that they put into the work that they did for your library system. If you're not paying your Black speakers and authors, why? Because you have a budget for it. And offering it is a good thing. Don't make them ask. An honorarium is a great thing. You know, sometimes the energy that it takes to put together something for your library community is a lot of work. But for Black people, it can be even more taxing when you consider all the other things I told you. So making sure that you're really doing the inclusive piece means that you pay them. Okay. And then the board. What does your board look like? You know, these are the people who govern, who make decisions when it comes to budget. So they're doing finance, they're doing your infrastructure, your grounds, they're creating opportunities for advancement. Maybe your DEI is included in your board, events, marketing. There's a lot of different things that tie in, but policy is one of them. This thing right here is the reason why we know who George Floyd is, right? This thing right here, this phone. If I tell a Black person they can't use this in my library, that's an equity issue. Because if somebody says something to me that is slur-based or offensive from a diversity or lack of a diversity standpoint, or if somebody tries to brutalize me and I have no proof, then I have no case. I have no safety. I'm at risk. So be careful with the rules that you have in your policies. Consider Black people, consider the present. And I'm so sad that I have to say that's the present. I'm so sad that I have to say, even the lady who sits before you with multiple degrees carries this thing around with her, and I'm ready to use it if I need to. Because I might have to Facebook Live that someone's hurting me or brutalizing me or harassing me. So you want to consider your policies. You also want to consider how are people on your board regarding their opportunities? Do they understand what their role is? Do they understand that they do answer to your community? Whether they're appointed or elected, they answer to the community. And do they care when they're creating curriculum and things of that nature? It's important to understand that. Not curriculum, but more so policies. It's important to understand that. Is there diversity in your board? Is there equity on your board? You can have a lot of diversity, but also not equity, right? So keep that in mind. And then ask yourself, in the history of your board, what are people like? You know, like what kind of complaints has your board brought to you about things that could be different in the library system? Okay. Blind spots are very frequent. It's very easy to have a lot of them. This is where you ask somebody to hold you accountable. Find one or two people. If you're working with the Black community, find one or two people who are Black, who have varied experiences. We're not a monolith. So you can find people with very different experiences and ask them to hold you accountable. You want to ask yourself, is what you're doing productive or performative? Performative is checking the box and saying, look what we did, we're so great. Say the words that don't feel good. Racism isn't positive. It's not happy. Be okay with being true and authentic, because Black people already have a history that is based in mistrust. So be honest, because we see it anyway. So that puts me right at 12:59. I was trying to make sure I finish on time. You might hear my alarm go off really soon. There it is. It's so important for me to finish on time. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Tara. That was Tara. I am so bad universally just with words. So now we are open to questions. There is one mention in chat of something that isn't specifically phrased as a question, but it is interesting. So it says, one of my worries about being sensitive is wondering if using Black is considered offensive to some, or if African American is considered offensive to some. I don't ever want to cause trauma or offense or exhibit a microaggression without consciously knowing what I am saying is okay.
I love that. And I think that's a person who's definitely considering the humanity and the fact that words have power. We know this, right? Library Systems, you are the dealer of words. So you know how powerful they are. I'll tell you about an experience very quickly where someone had the same question for me. So I was at Barnes & Noble in Livonia, Michigan, or Northfield. They call it Northfield, but it's like really close to Livonia. Anyway, so I was doing a book signing, and the lady said to me, hey, is it okay to say African American or Black? And she had the same question marks, and she thought that Black was derogatory. And what I share with her is that people have different experiences. For example, I have a sister-in-law who is Black, but her parents are actually from the Caribbean. So she doesn't resonate with that African American piece. She resonates as Black more so. Black people can be Cuban, Black people can be different races. Even when we talk about indigenous people, sometimes they're darker, right? So Black sometimes covers more ground, but you can always ask somebody what they want to be called too, you know, especially if you're doing it for data purposes or something. You could say, what do you prefer? You know, it's better than just calling them something that they don't like. Knowing how people identify is important.
We have one other question that says, can you provide suggestions for approaching a board that has no equity?
Letters are really important to the full board. Public comments, there should be usually there's an opportunity for 2 public comments in most boards, usually one at the beginning of a board meeting, usually one towards the end. Some libraries may not do that. If you only have 1 opportunity for public comments, that's not equitable. So I suggest having 2 opportunities is a really equitable way to do things. Partly because everybody has a different life and schedule, and it really just opens it up that you want to hear from people. Again, back to that community listening session, that's something that you could do as well. You can ask your board if they can host something like that so you can engage with them in that way.
What is the best way to engage with people, whether it's your employer or whether it's coworkers or whether it's members of your family who have, trying to think of a good way to say this, who have a blind spot when it comes to issues of equity and inclusion, who feel that there is no issue of equity and inclusion, who kind of have that denial of this situation in society and systemic racism. What is the best way to address that? So for example, me as a white person going to my family and saying, okay, this is not okay, and this is really not. What would be the best way, or friends or coworkers, to start that conversation?
Yeah, so I think it depends a lot on dynamic and that person in general. The energy that you both bring to each other. I can speak from my personal experiences. I definitely have had people, my husband's white, for those of you who don't know. You saw a little kid I put up there. He is biracial. My husband is white. So his ancestry comes from England and Germany. German's a big part of his genetic past. My son knows that he knows all of his heritage. Being that we have some family members that are white, some of them are very racist. So just because you got like a Black grandkid doesn't mean that you're not racist. Unfortunately, his grandparents are racist, and they made that really clear. They've never met my child. I can tell you that my husband's mom never met my child. And she also has not met the children of my sister-in-law, who's also Black, because she's racist. So my personal experience tells me that racism is very real. And also it tells me, when I look in a history book, that racism is real. Our news channels tell us, books tell us. I think that if someone wants to insist that it doesn't exist, especially after knowing a personal story, remember that Black trauma, you don't want to keep bringing that up for people to express. Even now I'm tentative as I share these very personal stories with you all. I'm hoping that you take that in and understand the labor that's involved in me sharing that, and care and connect that humanity to it. But I hope it also showcases that there is racism in America. There is racism maybe in your town. It's a real thing. Black people are not making it up, right? So I think that when people say that it doesn't exist, I raise an eyebrow. I do. And I think there's an opportunity for education. I do think that you can't convince anybody of anything if they don't want to see it. But if you are in a position where you are making plans for Black people and you don't acknowledge it, then that's a problem. That if you have a library system where you don't acknowledge it, that's a problem for your library and the community that you serve. Your Black people are taxpayers like everybody else. So you do need to keep them in mind, whether you want to or not. You see what I'm saying? You have a duty to keep them in mind. So your personal belief system is one way or another, but you do need to consider those people who pay into your system.
Do you have any recommendations for how libraries can hire with DEI in mind?
Yeah, so there's so many great organizations within libraries, and they're not always utilized. There's the Black Caucus of American Library Association that you can connect with. There's, don't just get a membership. Don't just be performative in that. Get involved. They have events. They have forums. There's Black Librarians Rock, which is an opportunity to understand more of what's needed. But go to your schools. If you're in Michigan, you have such a great opportunity, right? Because U of M has a great library school. Wayne State has a great library school. And you might be thinking, well, Tara, maybe you don't understand this, but the library industry is very white. So maybe you don't get that. Right. But why is it that way? Is it because of the lack of equity? Is it because of the lack of promotion when it comes to these topics? Is it because it's by design? So can you decide, to have a program at your library for young kids of color or young Black kids to understand more about the library profession? Can you put together an internship program that's specific? That there's disparity, so can you put something together specifically for Black students in undergrad who can go around and have maybe a 6-week program to understand about your library system, so they can learn everything from circulation desks to technology and information to collections? Can you give them a good training in that, so that when they are thinking about what master's degree they want, they consider library science?
And this is a little bit related to what you discussed a little bit ago, but it has a little bit of a different spin. What are your thoughts on bringing diversity, equity, and inclusion programming to a community that may react negatively because they're predominantly white, upper middle class, conservative, and Republican? But perhaps not all of them identifying with those labels are actively discriminating or racist.
I did cover this earlier, and my answer is the same. If you have people that are combative towards things that you do for the Black community, maybe that's an opportunity to maybe give some understanding as to why there needs to be equitable experiences. There's lots of different ways to do that. you're the purveyor of books, right? So like there's so many books that you can use as an example. There's Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. That's something that our board, not our board, our DEI committee had started reading. There are books like White Fragility. Have some book clubs on those things, but don't just have a book club to have a book club. Do something with it. So if you're going to have a book club, have a call to action at the end. Give education on why these things are important. I think that people have been trying to stop Black people from getting education and opportunities for power forever, which is why I say consider the history. They're not going to stop now. You will get combative people. You will get people who say, I don't want to do this for Black people, right? That's going to happen. But Black people are also taxpayers, and they're not always considered when you're making plans. So in order to make things right for all of your community, sometimes you have to make things equitable. Otherwise, you might not want to say that you're an equitable organization. And that's okay if that's who you want to be, but you got to own that. You can't have both, right? They say you can't have your cake and eat it too, which usually I reply, put a cake in front of me and you'll see if I can do both. But I digress. It's really important to understand that you either are a proponent of diversity, equity, inclusion, or you're not.
And I came across recently an example of something related to that, which I think may be pertinent here. And that's when you're considering things like access guidelines. And you may want to consider that, taxpayers, property taxpayers are not just people who own houses.
I am so grateful that you said that, because you tie that into equity. A lot of people are told, if you don't own, I don't have to think about you. And that's not how patrons work, right? I mean, I remember a long time ago, when I first became a trustee, it wasn't that long. But I remember looking up the word patron, and I was shocked when I discovered it was anybody that enters the library. So like, I always thought it definitely means if you live in a certain city or ordinance, but no, if I go into a library in Kalamazoo, or if I go into a library in Ann Arbor, I'm now a patron there because I am in that library using those services. And I didn't recognize that. So when you're working for the good of all of your patrons, you're working for the good of all your patrons. Thank you for bringing that up about the rental piece, because there is a discrimination there.
Rental, people who rent are paying property taxes. It's wrapped into their rent. And even here in Michigan, the Department of Treasury actually actively recognizes that. And I think that's not always a consideration.
It's true.
Does anybody have any questions? We still have some time. If you'd like, you can unmute and ask. Or a comment or anything else they'd like to add. No, and I can tell you that today, my huge red face learning opportunity is to do better with names. I've always historically been horrible with names, everybody's name. And so I am going to make a very strong effort now now that I understand that that is a particular issue, which I did not realize.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, and I love that you just did that, because what you did there, Claire, you show vulnerability, you connected to the humanity, and you also expressed that you're going to grow and learn and do better than maybe you did before, and also acknowledge that this was a blind spot. This isn't something that stood out, right? And that's why even when I start on topics like this, I want to make sure people don't feel like, oh, here's Tara beating us upside the head. I don't got time for that. I don't have time to beat you upside the head. That's not like a fun use of my time. But I do want to educate. I do want to make sure that we understand more, right? And I think that that's part of it. So thank you for being an example in that way.
Oh, well, we thank you very much. I learned a lot, and I'm excited for the next one. If we have no more questions, we're going to go ahead and let you out a little bit early. Thank you so much to our presenter, Tara Michener. Is that right? Did I get it right?
Yes. Okay. Funny thing about my last name. It's a hard one. Me and my husband sometimes pronounce it differently.
Oh, that's awesome. So thanks again. I hope everybody learned something and everybody had enjoyed it, and you will be receiving a copy of the slides as well as a copy of the link of the recording, and the full recording with captions will be up in about a week or so. Thanks again, everybody, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day and are able to enjoy this awesome weather.
Thank you
Thanks
so
again,
much.
Tara.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.